We have a lot on the docket tonight. We have terror, we have preparation for war, we have the tools of terror, the state tools of terror, and of course that's surveillance and censorship. All of that is coming up tonight. Let's start with the London terror attack. The BBC is reporting that 4 people have died, including an armed officer and a man believed to have been the attacker. These people have died in a terrorist accident or incident near the UK's Houses of Parliament. At least 20 people were injured, including 3 other police officers. Now, they point out that this alleged assailant drove a car into pedestrians on the Westminster Bridge, which is very close to the Houses of Parliament, before crashing it, trying to enter the complex. Armed with a knife, he attacked a police officer, stabbed him, and then turned to run towards Houses of Parliament and was shot. They're saying that they believe there's only one attacker, but they have now locked down the area. 2 of the victims are thought to have died on the bridge. They had 3 French students who were seriously injured on the bridge, as well as 3 police officers returning from a ceremony who were also injured on the bridge. One woman was rescued from the Thames with serious injuries. She apparently jumped or fell from the bridge. Now, it's interesting to see how CNN immediately reported this. People reported that they'd heard shots fired, so CNN focused on the gun, not on radical Islam. Of course, we have all the hallmarks of the MOs of radical Islamist attacks: the running down of pedestrians with a vehicle, attacks with a knife or with an axe. The gun was actually used to stop the individual, but the headlines from CNN, as reported by Kit Daniels, captured this. CNN says this was a firearms incident near the Parliament. Now, as they move on, and we had other news outlets report that they thought that it was an Asian, said that he was armed with a stick. No, it was much more severe than that. It was an 8-inch knife, according to more detailed reports that have come out. And the official story, although nobody has been officially named, the unofficial reporting indicates that it was an Islamic hate preacher. Not an Asian with a stick, but an Islamic hate preacher. This is from Zero Hedge. They say London terrorism suspect has been named unofficially as a hate preacher, Abu Izzadeen. They say his Twitter account has now been suspended, and he has unofficially been identified as the attacker. And of course, if you look at the picture, if you get a close-up look of that picture, you can see that this is somebody with an Islamic beard. He has a dark complexion. He is not Asian. Nothing about that narrative rang true. You just simply see mainstream media going out there with what they would like to be true. Now, we also see preparation for war in North Korea. And as reported by The Sun, this has resulted in humiliation yet again for Kim Jong-un. His rocket exploded seconds after launch. They say that he perhaps suffered stage fright. I would say that he suffered first stage fright from the aborted flight. And I guess we should extend many saddenings for this extinguished gentleman, or this extinguished rocket, I guess, this dictator whose plans have not worked out. And I don't know if it was his failure to launch or if it was actually an attack. We have an article on Infowars.com from Max Slavo saying, did the U.S. military infiltrate North Korean defense networks and take out their latest missile test? They said this did not go off normally. They said it was reported earlier by Zero Hedge earlier this month that the Obama administration was actively infiltrating North Korea's defense network and sabotaging their launches. Well, the U.S. government may have sabotaged those launches of Kim Jong-un. We hope that they did. Maybe they had an active role in that. But more concern to American citizens is what our U.S. government is doing to sabotage free speech with the surveillance state, with censorship. And of course, we've been seeing this last week with the testimony of FBI Director Comey on Capitol Hill. Even though we see multiple sources pouring cold water on the idea that Donald Trump would have been surveilled, and of course, we know what former NSA, former CIA Director Michael Hayden said: we don't spy on bad people, we spy on interesting people. We now learn from House Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes today, said that he learned while reviewing intelligence reports as chair of the House Intelligence Committee, he learned that Donald Trump's information had been collected. He said he finds this actually very alarming. He's notified House Speaker Paul Ryan. Well, it is alarming. And you should be alarmed as an American citizen as well by the surveillance state. And you should be alarmed by the fact that we have mainstream media as well as the FBI director pouring cold water on the idea that they would do wireless, warrantless searches on anyone. They're doing it on everyone. It's a very well-established fact. We've talked about this for years. We've had the Snowden documents. We've had Vault 7. And as that was happening, we had them come out with this absurd narrative mocking Donald Trump for saying that people were listening to him, surveilling what he had to say. He knows that because he knows the information that has come out. He's run his own operations in terms of telling limited number of people information. He knows that there's intelligence leaks, but of course, the FBI is not going to investigate the criminal leaks of information about General Flynn. But at the same time today, we also learned that the Department of Justice found falsely planted malware at Trump Tower that was designed to mimic ties to Russia. So think about this. We have a president-elect who is being monitored by the NSA, by other government agencies, and at the same time, we find that there is malware planted on computers at Trump Tower to try to frame them to show that they have some connections to Russia. And understand, as we look at all of these allegations that there was Russian hacking involved in terms of breaking into the DNC, I'm not sure that that's true. We've had other people say these documents were handed to them. Personally, I had one individual, former UK ambassador, who said, I went to the U.S., I was handed these documents in the park, but then we have other people say, no, they were part of a hacking operation that went through there. Well, if that was true, we need to understand from this article that was put on Infowars.com, Steve Watson points out that there's a CIA project identified by WikiLeaks as Umbridge that maintained a substantial library of Russian cyber attack techniques that were stolen from malware produced in other states, including the Russian Federation. So when they say that we see Russian fingerprints on this, as John McAfee said earlier in the week, if you see these fingerprints, it is not the work of competent state intelligence. As a matter of fact, they would have to be so grossly incompetent, it's impossible to believe, not credible, that this would be state intelligence. But they maintain a library so they can mask their operations and appear to be coming from another country. And as John McAfee and other cybersecurity experts have pointed out, this so-called hacking software that was used was actually out of date, very old, not even a current rev of commonly available software, not the kind of tools that you would see state intelligence use. But understand, at the same time, we learn that Donald Trump is being surveilled, and they say, oh, this was legal because it was done as part of FISA. We need to begin to pull this back, and we need to understand that it's not just ordinary citizens whose information is being collected, but the people who are at the most danger for this, as we've always said, have been the people who are in political power. People who are congressmen, people who are presidents, people who are political enemies. That is the real danger of the surveillance state. Yes, of course, it will be used against individuals. Yes, of course, they are monitoring your information. Not that you have anything to hide, not that they're going to come after you personally, but they want to know if their narrative is succeeding. They try to stop information coming from conservative sites or sites that are politically opposed to them. And they want to put out their information using the newly created Ministry of Truth that they stuck into the NDAA at the end of December, this so-called Center for Countering Disinformation and Propaganda is actually putting out disinformation and propaganda. How do they know if that's working? Well, they look at your metadata. That is the most important metric for them. They have to have feedback to know if their propaganda is working. So they fund and create the propaganda institution, but they also have to have this ability to get into your computers, all of us, so they can see if this is working. But for individuals like Donald Trump, for people who will oppose their political agenda, people like Rand Paul who are not going to buy into the neocon warmongering establishment and therefore immediately labeled as being allies of Vladimir Putin, for those people, it is especially dangerous. And so our political leaders ought to be the first ones to realize this danger of the uncontrolled surveillance police state and shut it down. And we can see that that is happening now. Let me give you another example of how they're coming after InfoWars. Yesterday, we put up a special report that I did, and it was an article, Saudi Arabia is now being sued by families of 9/11 attack. That was basically a fact-based article. Based on that title, Google sent us information and said, we've looked at the content in your video or your video details, and we don't think they're very advertiser friendly. As a result, your video cannot be monetized. Real close to being censored, but censored in a way that they want to defund any news organizations that are opposed to their official agenda. And we need to understand what's going on here. Any discussion of terror, they say, well, you can't talk about 9/11. We're going to put that on the back burner. If we look at a story that just came out yesterday, the Wall Street Journal reported that Google is stepping up efforts to keep ads away from controversial content. That would be what this is. If we go back to January the 26th, 2017, we see another article from Wall Street Journal. Could be almost exactly the same headline. Google steps up efforts to stop fake news. So in January, they were stepping up efforts to stop fake news. Now they're stepping up efforts to keep ads away that are controversial. So in other words, let's just put this all under one umbrella article. Maybe the Wall Street Journal will run it. Google steps up efforts to shut down free speech and free press, because that's what this amounts to. You have to understand that they want to, when they step up these efforts to stop fake news, they will be the arbiters of what is fake and what isn't. They will be the arbiters of what is controversial and what isn't. And we'll put up this article about Saudi Arabia now being sued. This is the government's official story, that Saudi Arabian-sponsored terrorists brought down these towers. Now, I don't believe that happened, but I think it's very important to discover what truly happened, that we start this discovery process. This lawsuit is a very important step in that direction. But if the government is going to put out an official story that says that these Saudi Arabian terrorists brought down these 3 buildings with 2 planes, then the victims ought to be able to get compensation for that. To try to keep that from happening, they hid those pages for 15 years until Donald Trump said, I want to see those redacted pages. We had senators, people who were on the 9/11 Commission, said, we need to show people what's been censored in these missing 28 pages. They could not get that to happen. Donald Trump was able to get that happen. And as a result of that, even though Obama tried to veto a bill that would allow these people to get compensation from the very individuals and the state that their report said had created this 9/11 terrorist act, it was overridden by the Congress. And so now these people are able to sue. They have already gone through and started identifying a money trail going from the Saudi Arabian government to these individuals. And understand, the Saudi Arabian government is joined at the hip with the CIA. It's difficult to understand where the Saudis began and where the U.S. government and the CIA end. They are basically a distinction without a difference. We've been allied like that since we went off the gold standard and used them to prop up the petrodollar. So it's very important that we do this investigation. It's very important that we explore these ties. But even to talk about the fact that there is a lawsuit now that has been authorized is something that will get you, if not completely censored, it will get you demonetized by Google. That is the danger. And that's what we see happening. And if we look at Google's stepping up efforts to move away from controversial content, we have talked about how Google's surrogate has said, we're not going to be allowed to put our ads on other people's websites because we're InfoWars. And even though our ads are not about political content, they censor it on that end. Now they're going in the other direction, and they're saying, if you have a site like Daily Caller or Breitbart or InfoWars, you cannot have ads served to you because you are a controversial site. Who is driving this? Well, Wall Street Journal reported that it is being driven by HSBC. HSBC, the people who have been convicted multiple times by the U.S. government for money laundering, for drug cartels and terrorist organizations. These people are now saying, we don't want to talk about terrorism, we don't want to talk about controversial things, and we want to shut people down. What they want to shut down is the ability to fund independent news organizations that will report on what HSBC is doing, that will report on what Google is doing. That is what is truly behind this. Now, another example of how they have spun the narrative, and we saw this at the very beginning of how CNN was immediately spinning the narrative of the London terror attack to blame guns rather than radical Islamic terrorism. We see today that the story that is being floated around is an attack saying that Paul Manafort is a puppet of Putin, that he has ties to Vladimir Putin. They're going back 10 years to work that he did on behalf of a Russian billionaire who has ties, who is a friend of Vladimir Putin, but they are ignoring the ties and have continued to ignore the ties of Podesta, John Podesta, who was campaign chair for Hillary Clinton the entire time, who had been chief of staff for Bill Clinton's White House, who has worked as a lawyer for the Obama White House. And in 2014, when he joined the Obama White House, he did not disclose his financial ties to a Russian state-run company that was founded by Vladimir Putin. And he has made arguably a lot more money out of this than Paul Manafort has. His ties and connections are more current than Paul Manafort's. That is the double standard that we see. Stay with us when we come back. We're going to talk about Obamacare and more information about this terror attack.
In case you haven't heard, InfoWars has become the most influential media outlet in America. We're making freedom go viral. And now we are proud to announce a new weapon in the epic battle against the globalists. InfoWars Prime, where you can watch live high-definition feeds of the Alex Jones Show, plus exclusive insider videos from the InfoWars crew and behind-the-scenes action. Go to Infowars.com/app and download today. InfoWars Prime is available right now for your iPhone or Android. You will have access to exclusive videos that you can't see anywhere else. And that means live coverage of events and breaking news on location as it happens. You can also take advantage of amazing deals from the InfoWars store that are only available for InfoWars Prime subscribers. That's InfoWars Prime at Infowars.com/app. And if you can hear my voice, you are the resistance.